conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
The latest lawsuit against Twitter CEO Elon Musk accuses him of sexism and ableism when he laid off thousands of employees.
In new court filings, former Twitter workers allege that layoffs after Elon Musk took over the company targeted women and the disabled. It's the latest in a series of federal court cases that have been filed since Musk took over at the end of October. The latest suit filed alleging that women employees were targeted for termination. The workers' lawyer says the company laid off 57% of its female workers compared to 47% of men. When it came to engineers, 63% of women lost their jobs compared to 48% of men.
Christian Kaftan with Fox 2 San Francisco. New York Times employees walked off the job for the first time in decades to protest failed contract negotiations. Hundreds of workers took part in the one-day strike.
At the bargaining table for 20 months, and we don't have a contract yet.
Times journalist Larry Buchanan talking to Fox News Digital, and he says they have not had a pay raise in 2 years. A Las Vegas woman shoots and kills a suspected carjacker.
Cops say 2 women were sitting in a parked car when 3 suspects pulled up in another vehicle and blocked theirs in. Police say the 3 then got out of their car with guns and ordered the women out. They say that when one of the guys had trouble starting the women's car, she grabbed his gun and ran. And when one of the other men tackled her, she shot him dead. Cops calling it a case of self-defense. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And Nick Carter of the Backstreet Boys faces a new lawsuit. It claims that he raped an underage autistic fan in 2001 when the girl was 17. Shannon Shea Ruth is now 39. Carter denies the allegations. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Christmas is a very special time, but it can also be a very hard time. For the foster children Harvest House serves, it can be difficult and painful being away from their families and siblings. During Harvest House's Christmas celebration event, we hope that siblings living in different foster homes can join together to share in Christmas joy. We need your help to provide all 600 plus foster children with Christmas gifts. Help us make this a memorable Christmas for each of them. Harvest House will be accepting gifts until December 14th. Contact us at 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net if you have questions or want a suggested gift list. That's 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net.
Federal employees and annuitants, it's time to choose your 2023 health plan. Choose Take Care. Open season is November 14th through December 12th. Take Care's on-island network includes GRMC, SDA, GRC, FHP, and over 1 million providers off-island with positive benefit enhancements that expand access to care. Go to takecareasia.com/open season 22 or call 671-647-3526. Take Care, our island, your health plan.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Free state, that's where we are. State not meaning one of the 50, but state meaning nation, country, whatever. And we live in a free country. We got to fight to hang on to it because the forces of evil are trying really hard to take it over. And that's one good reason to be listening to Tall Tales, because as we push the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, freedom, liberty, things like that, conservatism. I know most of our tailgaters, in fact, all of our tailgaters, you know, that's what they're here for. Now, if that's not what you're here for, you came to the right place because you need some schooling. Let's start out with Demi Ekotny. I don't know what's happened at the Daily News, but they're writing editorials again.
Oh, shocker. Can't wait.
Our view, holding COLA increase bill was good, responsible call. Lawmakers of the 36th Guam legislature are closing out their final days of session with a bang, packing in the heavy, controversial bills onto their agenda, but nonetheless making at least one sensible call. Wednesday's session brought a measure introduced by Senator Amanda Shelton to the discussion table, a potential law that could help Gov Guam retirees stretch their fixed income with a gradual raise in their annual cost of living adjustment payments. Bill 257, if enacted, would increase Gov Guam COLA payments by $100 a year from the average amount of $2,200 to $2,500 by fiscal year 2026. Given inflation rates and increasing costs of everyday necessities, from power bills to groceries, this nominal increase is but a thoughtful gesture, a small but no doubt helpful addition for struggling senior citizens, but nowhere significant in comparison to rising rental costs. Still, lawmakers set an important example by calling into question the technical errors that prevent the measure from becoming legally enacted, notably the fact that no specific funding source was identified. This lack of a suitable funding source has been an age-old problem from lawmakers of the past, many of whom simply want to do the right by the people they serve. Now, I talked about this the other day, this funding source. Now, sometimes you have legislation that does have a funding source, and it's called earmarking funds. So you could say that, as an example, here's a good example. All fines paid by directors who don't comply with the Sunshine Law go to the ethics funds. That's earmarked financing. And I haven't thought about it enough, but same with customs. I think most of customs and quarantines money comes from the fees that they collect. That's a funding source, but it's not the norm. And the fact that a bill doesn't have a funding source does not mean that it's fatally flawed.
Is it because all funding comes from the same place?
Well, ultimately it does. So if you don't have the earmarked funding, then, and you, let's say you create a new department, let's say you create a department of misinformation.
The bois?
Yeah, and you tell how the chairman or how the director is going to be chosen, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like the bois. You know, when the bois was enacted, there wasn't a section there that said there will be a 10% tax on tampons, which will be covered over to the bois to fund its operations. That wasn't there.
You got to warn me before I take a sip of a drink.
Yeah, so they just enacted the bois, and as with most of government agencies, the funding comes in the annual budgets. I guess these guys weren't listening 2 days ago when I explained this.
No.
Yeah. The lack of a suitable funding source has been an age-old, keep spinning your myths here, an age-old problem for lawmakers of the past, many of whom simply want to do right by the people they serve. How touching. They introduce bills and measures that sound good. Oh, here's a sentence for you, Jose. They introduce bills and measures that sound good on paper.
That's some loud paper.
Let me try that once. Let me see how this editorial. Yeah, it reads pretty well. Nah, it doesn't sound very good on paper, Jose.
All I hear is a lot of rustling.
Yeah. But just aren't backed by the teeth and funding needed to turn good intentions into reality. We applaud senators for identifying the funding issue with Bill 257. Now, what they identified was this. It sounds like something I would ask. This is a great idea. Who's going to pay for it? Next question, how much is it going to cost? That's what they asked, and they decided it's going to cost too much. We applaud senators for identifying the funding source of Bill 257 in the discussion phase before it was added to the rolls of Gov Guam's countless. This sounds so good, you know. There are two ways to make people think you're smart, Jose. One is to be smart, and if you are, you don't need to tell people. They'll figure it out for themselves. The other way is to learn a few phrases that you throw into a conversation that makes you sound smart. Oh, that's an unfunded mandate. That's BS. We applaud senators for identifying the funding source, the funding issue of Bill 257, in the discussion phase before it was added to the rolls of Gov Guam's countless unfunded mandates. Public laws we would like to follow, but we simply can't afford to implement.
As opposed to our unmandated funded projects.
Exactly. Yeah, like the 19th floor, right? We hope the senators of the 36 find an affordable solution to the problems with Bill 257. More importantly, we hope the incoming senators of the 37th take notes from this particular situation and stick to introducing workable laws that meet legal requirements, identify stable funding sources, and work for all of Guam, not just the special interest groups that will help them secure election. And of course, that's what this was.
That was a great art in the paragraph.
Yeah, finally they got around to it. Now, had they not screwed up so bad on the unfunded mandate part, they'd have gotten a blue star. But no, not today. So here's what we're talking about. We're talking about the retirement fund and retirees. And I'll just talk about the old plan because, you know, they've come up with a couple of new plans, and I have to admit I haven't studied them enough to really speak with authority on them. So the retirement fund works like this. And when you are or worked like this, when you were an active government employee, a percentage of your salary, I think it was 6%, was contributed to the fund. And the government contributed money to the fund also, more than yours. And the rate was set by the Retirement Fund Board of Directors every year. So that money accumulated at interest in the fund. The board invests the monies in the retirement fund in various investments, and they've done a pretty good job over the years. When you meet the service requirements, maybe 20 years, maybe 25, whatever, then you can retire. And you were paid an annuity. You get 2 checks a month on the 15th and the end of the month. You're paid an annuity that lasts until you die. And after you die, your surviving spouse will get a 60% payment for the rest of her life. The formula is a little bit too complicated to go into a talk show as to how much the annuity would be, but it depends on your years of service and the amount of money you contributed. The more money you contribute, the larger your annuity. Surprise, surprise. The retirement fund as created, started out paying out annuities like $9,000 or $10,000, which once upon a time was big money. When I started teaching here, the average teacher made a little over $3,500, Jose. So you can imagine that 10 grand was
late 60s, early 70s?
63.
Wow.
Yeah,
early 60s. Yeah. That's pretty good for early 60s.
Yeah. So in the beginning, that would be not the size, that would be the total of your annuity that you'd get, in payments. And they added a section in the law that said every year your annuity payments would increase by $200. Well, at the time, that was a pretty good chunk, a couple of $100. You could buy a car for $100 back in those days. $200 was a lot. And that was the so-called cost of living allowance. And it was never changed. It was paid out of money in the fund. So I've been retired since 1995. Let's see, how many years is that? 27 years? Times 2, it's $5,400. It's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. But it certainly is not a cost of living allowance. A cost of living allowance would be something that would be indexed to something like the Consumer Price Index or some measure of inflation, so that as the cost of things that you buy go up, your annuity would go up a pace. Social Security has a cost of living allowance every year. And this year it's going to be big because of the runaway inflation, which some people, oh, this is good, we're getting more Social Security this year. Not good at all. So that's what a cost of living allowance is. Now, we talk in terms of the COLA here, which is an acronym standing for cost of living allowance, but it's not. It's not even close to a cost of living allowance. It is a gift from the government of Guam to retirees. And the size of the gift is determined by statute, by an appropriation. And it's been $2,000 for the last few years. So the legislature says cost of living allowance this year, $2,000. So the retired university professor whose annuity is in six figures gets an extra $2,000. You know, the guy who retired as a general helper at the Department of Public Works, who's maybe retired at $16,000, guess how much? $2,000. It's not a cost of living allowance. It's not even close to a cost of living allowance. It doesn't come from the retirement fund. It comes from public funds, from the taxes that you pay, Jose. So you're funding the so-called COLA. So, and to me, that's the real issue. So here comes Shelton. She wants to increase it a little bit more. But it's really not a good plan at all. If you want to deal with it, then turn it into a real cost of living allowance. I'm going to use the E word here so that there's some equity involved. So, you know, maybe you cut it off at a certain, maybe anybody drawing $30,000 in retirement per annum, no cost of living allowance. But that's not the way it works. And it's not going to go away because, as this editorial points out, it helps for re-election. The retirees are a block of voters, and the senator that horses around with retirees' annuities may have a real serious election problem. Now, full disclosure, when those checks are cut next November, it's a direct deposit type thing. When the checks are cut, I'm not going to write out a check to the treasurer of Guam and send mine back.
No?
No, too selfish. It's too selfish. Okay, it's not time for a break yet, but I got somebody on the phone. It would be none other than Harvey Egna, who wants to talk about cola. Pepsi Cola, Harvey.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for taking my call this fine Friday afternoon.
We hate Friday. Tall Tales, we hate Fridays, Harvey.
Hey, you know, it seems an election year, Senator Shelton comes out with a nice round 10% figure based on zero analysis. And, you know, that got me to thinking when this happened that our COLA is really more of a Christmas club payment than a COLA. A true COLA would be spread out over the periodic payments that a retiree receives, which I believe are twice a month, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, and I'm curious, why don't we mirror what the Social Security Administration does? The Social Security Administration has a small army of statisticians and actuaries that analyze lots of different economic factors. In January, for example, Social Security recipients are going to be receiving, I believe it's 8.9% increase due to inflation. I think it's the second highest one in history or since maybe 1970. It's based on some analysis, is my point. Coming up with a 10% figure that you pulled out of your hat is not based on some analysis. And it's paid once a year. So how does that help you with your monthly electric bill? Maybe it helps you do your Christmas shopping, but it doesn't help you with your bills all throughout the year. And as you mentioned, it's really the same for everybody, whether it's a professor with, quite a high annuity or somebody who is, a lower paid employee. But it seems like the retirement plan should be, maybe revamped and run more along the way that Social Security is run with an annual increase based on some intelligent analysis rather than, a random senator coming up with a nice round figure in election year.
Well, Harvey, you must have been listening because I kind of went through the same exercise a few minutes ago just before you called, and either I agree with everything you say or you agree with everything I said.
I think I signed on a bit late. My apologies if I didn't catch what you said.
Well, we look forward to find people that agree with me, and yesterday we had somebody who wanted to play pin the tail on the talk show host. So
okay,
I was glad to entertain your call, Harvey. Thanks for calling in.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Bye bye.
So long. Yeah, let's see, where was I here? I lost my Facebook page somehow. Yeah, I got it back. Yeah, what Harvey says is a good idea, but, our retirement fund is not in good financial shape. We keep talking about the unfunded liability of the fund, which means that, there will be a time, unless things improve, that we won't have enough money to pay the retirees the rate that they're entitled to under law. Now, we've done well, and we've caught up on a lot of that. But to crank in the COLA in the manner that Harvey and I are talking about is just going to drain those funds a little bit faster.
Can I ask a question that's probably a very basic one, but I think a lot of people don't understand. In the private sector, I've worked for many companies that offer a retirement plan, and it's always based off the market. You could some places I was able to choose where my retirement is invested in, either high risk or low risk. From the government, Guam, is it just from the taxpayer pool, or is there some sort of market type investment to pull out that retirement?
Well, there are two kinds of retirement funds: defined contribution and defined benefit. Our old plan is defined benefit. In other words, you could know the day you start working how much your retirement is going to be if you make some assumptions. I'm going to work for 25 years. My 3 highest years are going to be so much. This is going to be my retirement, and it's going to happen. A defined contribution plan would be like a 401k. You contribute 6% of your salary. Management will contribute some form of matching. Very few will do a 100% match, maybe a 50% match. And the company then will sign up for various funds that they will deposit your money in, and you get to choose which funds, what kind of a outfit you're going to do. And that, of course, will determine your retirement. The defined benefit plan, like the government of Guam has, is almost disappeared in the private sector for a couple reasons. One, it costs more than the defined contribution. And two, the government regulates it so extremely that there are so many traps for the unwary that relatively successful companies have had to go out of business because they didn't handle their 401ks right. So, I mean, because they didn't handle their defined defined benefits plans properly. So they just said, the hell with it. We're going 401k, and that's it. And you can hire management companies to do the really heavy lifting. So all you got to do is send out some checks. But that's a good question, Jose, and I think it's one that most people don't understand. All right, so much for the editorial. They when it comes to the Blue Star, Jose, they were close, but
ding ding. No ding.
No cigar.
No cigar.
No cigar. Yeah. All right, let's you want to take a break? Okay.
About that yet? Let's take a break.
Check out the newest hydro and garden center to hit Guam, Crop King Hydro. We have a huge selection of plant nutrients, soils, hydroponic mediums, organic pest control pumps, plant support, tools, and so much more. Call 635-4769. 635-GROW. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 6 at the Dededo Satina Mall, right across from Payless and Paradise Fitness. For whatever you grow, think Crop King Hydro. Crop King Hydro. All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizava. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so let's see what we got on the card here this afternoon. I start out, of course, with systemic racism. And I don't have any Public Law 36-34 errors today. So the first substantive item on the card is KOAM versus the Post. And then I've got sexist organization versus women. Brandon versus the United States Marine Corps. You can probably figure out what that one's about. Wichita State versus biology, and that's all I got on the card today. Gina Campos posted again about that article. What's it called, Jose?
I don't have it on my Facebook.
I had it, and all of a sudden it's gone. I wonder how that happened. Oh, I know. So when I lost Facebook, I went to yesterday's Facebook, and I was looking at yesterday's. So, Gina, if you could send me an email with what you're looking for, and I'll try to put something together over the weekend. Okay, so starting out with KUAM versus the Post. And I've already covered the Post part before, but I've got to cover it again. You know how from time to time I do the journalism beat. And perhaps the subject matter of the story is not really Tall Tales material, but the way the media cartel and others handle the story is worth examining because it tends to show where we are.
More interesting than the story itself.
Sometimes, yeah. So yesterday I did the story that ran in the Post that dealt with Rory Respicio, Conchita Titano, the Port Board of Directors, and me. And here's the headline for that story. Now, I'm going to want some, if you feel like it, you could evaluate the treatments of these 2 news outlets on Facebook. But here's the headline for the Post article. Klitzkie blasts remarks made by Port on FOIA requests. How did KUAM treat it? KUAM asks a question. Did Klitzkie go too far with requesting documents from the Port Authority? Which one of them is spinning? That's what I'm going to ask you. Which one of these stories is written by a spin doctor? Now, of course, we know that the print media has the luxury of a little bit more space. TV has to be shorter, and it can't have the same style. It's got to be easily understood. It's got to be kind of punchy because it is a visual medium, right? But visual medium, and at least in the paper here, I didn't get the chance to watch it on TV, but they ran a picture that's about 5 years old in the news article. And I suppose I should feel good about that because they ran a picture when I hardly had any gray hair at all. So people are going to look at this and they say, Klitzkie, geez, I wonder if that's Bob's younger brother. No gray hair.
He changed since his break.
Yeah. Okay, so then we go into the story. Former senator and current talk show host Bob Klitzkie is taking issue with the reactions from one government agency on his demands for public documents, which is true. Former Senator Bob Klitzkie is expressing frustration over Freedom of Information Act requests. Now, is there a difference there? Klitzkie is taking issue with reactions from one government agency, the other one expressing frustration over Freedom of Information Act requests, alleging the Port Authority broke the law when they didn't hand over certain documents he requested.
One of them is describing what's in front of them, and the other one has somehow gotten into your head.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you want to say something about me, there are a lot of things you could say, some of which are not broadcast quality. But don't say that I'm frustrated.
Or expressing it.
Yeah, that's not part of my bag of tricks, being frustrated. I think there are times when other folks who run across me might be frustrated, but not me. So that already kind of shades the story a little bit, the headline and that first quote. And then the KOM goes on to say the documents in this case involve the fees paid out and the case against recently acquitted and reinstated Port Police Officer Frank San Nicolas. The Post says Klitzkie spoke to the Post following comments made during a board meeting of the Port Authority where General Manager Rory Respicio claimed it was disconcerting that the agency received messages from Klitzkie alleging the port's responses to the demands were in violation of local law. Now, KUAM doesn't say that Rory was frustrated. It's not fair. So once again, a big difference here. KUAM goes to what the dispute was about, not what I think the real thrust of the story is. The thrust of the story is the way the board, the director and one board member, treated a statutory right that I was engaged in. They didn't have to act on it. It was not on their agenda. There was no reason for them to talk about it at all. It was completely gratuitous.
And KOM says that Roy Respicio brought it up. It was Conchita Titano who brought it up.
Conchita Titano brought it up, yeah. And I hypothesized in yesterday's show, did it work like this? Conchita and Rory are out in the cloakroom, and Rory says, I get sick of that damn Klitzkie, and his FOIA requests. What did he do now? Well, he said I violated the law. He doesn't get to say whether I violated the law. Connie said, what do you want me to do? Rory said, why don't you mention it during the meeting, and then I can comment on it, because it's not on the agenda. I'm just hypothesizing this. Otherwise, why would Conchita speak out on that?
Maybe she thought she was at a water cooler.
The water cooler, yeah.
'Cause that was water cooler talk is what happened.
Exactly, yeah. So, so the real story here is how the board, that Rory and Conchita behaved during that board meeting. I like the phrase ex cathedra, which means from the chair. They were both speaking in their individual capacities during an official meeting of the board. KOM goes on to say, the agency's general manager, Rory Respicio, also a former senator, told his board about the issue. The talk had at least one board member asking if what Klitzkie is doing is harassment. Going on to the next paragraph in the Post, if you think I'm not complying, take me to court and let the judge say I'm not complying. But he doesn't get to say that I'm not complying and using it for his own personal political agenda, Rory said during the November 30 meeting. And that, of course, is what the news is. And then the next paragraph in KOM, I will file sunshine law requests with any government agency with something comes up on the horizon that just doesn't look right, and I want to see the papers, Klitzkie asserted. He's a former judge and former lawmaker and an attorney. Respicio retorted, and for him to come out and say we are in violation of the FOIA is disconcerting. Now, notice how they built totally different sentences around the word disconcerting. Next paragraph on the Post. The approach to local transparency laws didn't sit well with Klitzkie, who stressed that court challenges favor, at least financially, the government that charged itself to comply with citizen demands for public documents. Quote, tough talk from Rory, who's represented by government counsel at no cost to him whatsoever. He knows that it cost me over 10 grand to take Mike Bora to court, and it took over a year to get enforcement, etc. Now, the KOAM never mentioned that at all. It just, if the agency's general manager said, hang on a second here. Where did I find that? Anyhow, Rory comes up with the, you can't say that I violated it, you got to take me to court, without the other side of that story at all. And that's what we usually think of as journalists, right? If there are two different takes on the same event, a journalist would put both in. He doesn't give Rory the high ground by saying, you think I violated it, then you take me to court. End of story. Okay, going on. under Guam law called the Sunshine Reform Act, and then the next part of this, of the Post story, is a very nice discussion, a well-done discussion about how the Sunshine Law works. Rory ought to pass one on to Conchita so she'd understand what she's talking about. So, again, back to KOAM. Klitzkie, now a radio talk show host, has been going after certain documents at the Port Authority. Specifically, he wants to look at details of attorney's fees owed following the dismissal of the case against San Nicolas. And then here's a quote from me. Why is it that they don't want to come up with these documents? The real answer is this. I asked for papers that show the Port Authority owed $40,000 in attorney's fees. Rory sent a check showing that they paid $40,000. That's not what I asked for. And then KOM goes on to say, during the last board meeting, Respicio discussed the issue with board members. He said, as you know, the Freedom of Information Act does not allow or require us to produce documents that don't exist. Klitzkie has a tendency of emailing everybody and saying, mailing everybody. So what do they have? A Klitzkie's Picking on Me club somewhere in the government of Guam? Some kind of a cult.
Rory Charlie Brown Respicio.
General Manager, you're in violation of FOIA. Klitzkie said, if you don't have the documents, say you don't have the documents. You don't send me something else and hope that it'll work. Respicio said, saying his legal counsel is handling the matter, saying basically telling him to cease and desist. So Rory lawyers up, and he's, once again, not on the agenda. He's telling everybody there that what he's told counsel, to tell me to cease and desist. Board member Conchita Titano questioned what action could be taken, saying, if it's not going to stop, then is there recourse the port can take? That if it's proven that this is harassment, the government can't continue to waste resources on comments that are untrue. And let's see. Going back to the Post, the records Klitzkie requested relate to a settlement between the port and Frank Co. San Nicolas. A port officer was reinstated with back pay following a settlement of his Civil Service Commission case. San Nicolas, initially terminated by the agency when charged with criminal sexual conduct, was given his job back after juries found him not guilty in 2 separate trials. Klitzkie said, particularly was looking for records that explain how the $40,000 attorney's fee figure, which is also paid out to San Nicolas settlement, was calculated and justified. What Respicio sent was a check for $40,000 showing that they had paid J. Areola. That's not the same thing. So I wrote back and said, you're in violation of the Sunshine Law. You didn't send the papers. It was only during the board meeting, Klitzkie said, that it was explained the requested documents didn't exist. This was in the Conchita Titano, Rory Respicio dialogue. That's when I found out that they didn't exist. Rory, you know, the law says that we don't have to create a document that doesn't exist, and we can't furnish it. Well, good deal. What are you going to do with that smoking gun, Rory?
That you provided.
That you provided yourself, yeah. So the Post winds up by saying, if he'd said that in the beginning, that would have been it. You can't send what you want to send. You have to send what's demanded. So that's what that's about. You know, and this idea of who gets to enforce the Sunshine Law, obviously it's the person who demands the public records. It's up to the demander, the citizen, to determine what follows next. It's not up to Respicio to say, well, I didn't send it, so take me to court. Going back to the Post, to KOM, Port member Conchita Titano questioned what action could be taken, saying it's going to stop. If it's not going to stop, then there is some recourse the port can take if it's proven that this is harassment. The government can't continue to waste on resources on comments that are untrue. I have always told Senator Klitzkie, take me to court, said Respicio. If you think I'm not complying with FOIA, then take me to court. Let the judge say I'm not complying, but he doesn't get to say that I'm not complying and use it for his own political agenda.
Again, this sounds like a conversation two neighbors have at their fence.
Exactly.
Not a board meeting.
Yeah.
In other words, this also sounds like the setup for an intimidation, but public record now.
Exactly, yeah. So, again, comparing KUAM.
Mm-hmm. One gets it and one doesn't.
Yeah, and the Post, KUAM ran Rory's roar. Rory's roar. Oh, just take me to court. My God, he showed me. He'll undergo the perils of having to go to court. And the Post did a really nice job of showing both sides. Not KOAM. They just let it go. Well, yeah, so that the person who didn't know any more about it than this is tempted to say, yeah, Klitzkie went too far. That's what the headline says. Did Klitzkie go too far with requesting documents from the Port Authority? So I'll leave it up to you to determine which of these stories look like the product of a journalist and which of these stories did not have journalistic merit.
This is another thing about this story here. Why are the journalists, both the Post and KOM, focusing on the banter, not the banter between you two, but the issue between you two, as if that's the story? The real story is, why are they discussing this in a meeting that it was not on the agenda, and talks about measures against a private citizen to stop him from asking about FOIA or Sunshine Act, or for fulfilling Sunshine Act laws? Exactly. This is incredible. Are we so used to Gov Guam that they don't even notice it? Probably. Okay, so that's the first item on the card. Let's take a short break, Jose.
Try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus tenactac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 5.99% and up to $50,000. And with the Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas loan, contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier. Member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Okay, so here we are after the break. I got one more shot here on the Post versus KUAM or vice versa. I try to look at the comments when I read these things, and the standard comment goes something like this: I get over $25,000 a month working part-time. I kept hearing other people tell me how much money they can make online, so I decided to look. Yeah, and I guess there's no easy way to keep those out.
They're not monitored either.
No. But the story that ran in the Post did have a comment from Matthew Phillips.
This would be interesting.
Yeah. Now, I've never laid eyes on Matthew Phillips, but I kind of feel like I know him. because he's been commenting on stories that had my name in it for years and years and years. Yeah.
A fan?
I'm kind of a fan, yeah, because he said some kind of interesting things.
He's a fan.
Well, I'm a fan of his.
You're a fan of his.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He's pretty hard to the left, but he says some really interesting things from time to time. And I think, judging by what he says, he's a tailgater. Yeah, which makes him a pretty good guy in my book. And he might be one of those guys that I talked to in the second part of my sermon or my homily after the Second Amendment. If you believe in et cetera, you're in the right place. And if you don't, by golly, you're really in the right. Maybe that's Matthew, right? But Matthew follows things very closely. And here's what Matthew says. Rory is quick to settle cases. And at the same time, he wants to be taken to court. Why the dichotomy? He isn't paying for it. You are. Yeah, so.
Yeah, we did say that yesterday, right?
Say again?
Then wasn't that said yesterday?
Could have been.
Something very similar.
Yeah, I probably said, Rory doesn't pay for this. Well,
he settles.
Yeah. So, yeah, Rory wants to get the court involved because it doesn't cost him anything, right? Including the settlements. It's not your money. It's not his money. It's yours. So I think Matthew caught more of the essence of the story in 3 sentences than the KUAM did in a whole newscast. All right, let's go on to the next item on the card. This is a sexist group versus women. Versus women. And this one ran in the Post. It's titled, Heartbeat Act at Bottom of Agenda. Women's Chamber has concerns. The Women's Chamber of Commerce.
Did they put a full disclosure in there?
How sexist can you be, right? The Women's Chamber. We've had a Chamber of Commerce. I think we celebrated the 97th year anniversary for the Guam Chamber of Commerce here just a few months ago. And the chamber is men and women of all different kinds of folks, right? And women have done very well in the Chamber of Commerce. Right now, the president of the chamber is a woman. There are women on the board. There have been women on the board for at least since the 1980s, at least since I was on the board. So women, women are not shoved aside or given inferior roles or told to stick around and do the dishes after we have our monthly lunches or something like that. Women do very well in the chamber. Now, if that's the case, why do we need a women's chamber of commerce?
That's where the disclosure I'm talking about comes from.
Well, first of all, why do we have a women's chamber of commerce? And I won't answer that question, but I'll say it's a classic case of the soft bigotry of low expectations. We can't expect the women to go head-to-head, eyeball to eyeball with the men in the real Chamber of Commerce. So we'll start a rump Chamber of Commerce called the Women's Chamber of Commerce. Then we know who will be on the board, who the officers will be. They'll all be women, right? So, first of all, I question the legitimacy, not the legitimacy, but the appropriateness of a separate Chamber of Commerce just for women. If we had something like the Rotary Club 40 years ago, Rotary Club was men only. And if you follow these fraternal organizations, when I first came to the island, I was told that the really important organizations are the Chamber, the Navy League, and the Rotary. If you wanted to rub elbows with the movers and shakers, that was the place to go. And that was true of the Rotary. Now, the initial design of Rotary was that they'd only have one of each profession. One lawyer, one banker, and so on. And they're very, in order to become a Rotarian, it's more complicated than filling out some papers. They have to accept you into the membership. So I think maybe right around 1980, somebody filed suit and got a state court decision that it was impermissible discrimination to limit Rotary membership only to men because of some of the factors I mentioned. I don't think it was correct on the law, but once that came out, Rotary International embraced it, and they just said, okay, that's when they opened it up to women. So now there are female Rotarians and male Rotarians, etc. But to start with, an extremely influential organization limited only to men. That is not the chamber. There's no need for, that the women's approach was the Seroptimus Club, women only, right? So there's no need for a Seroptimus Chamber of Commerce because we've got one that accommodates everybody. You don't have to be, you fill out your papers, you got to pay dues, and that's it. Anybody can be admitted. But we have the Women's Chamber of Commerce. All right, let's take a big halftime break, and I'll come back to the sexist group versus women.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
She'll be home soon. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The first stop for American basketball star Brittany Griner, just released from a Russian prison, will be an Army hospital in San Antonio, Texas, where she'll get a checkup.
Brittany Griner had actually been detained, tried, convicted, and imprisoned on what the Russians claimed were drug possession charges. Griner spent about 10 months in custody, but no more, thanks to the deal to send back to Russia Victor Bout. He's been accused of supplying arms to al-Qaeda, the Taliban, rebels in Rwanda, and drug cartels the world over. But White House officials insist that swapping a basketball player for a dangerous arms dealer was the only deal they could manage. As for Whelan, who's been imprisoned on what he says are trumped-up charges of espionage, which have no basis in fact, today's news was a devastating blow.
Fox's Kevin Cork. Ukrainian officials claim Russian forces have installed multiple rocket launchers at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The claim raises fears Moscow may use the shut-down power plant as a base to fire on Ukrainian territory. The U.S. House passed a bill Thursday to boost military spending, which also ends COVID vaccine requirements for the military. The bill now heads to the Senate. Unsealed court documents show a man accused of the Colorado Springs gay nightclub shooting was arrested last year on other charges, but Anderson Lee Aldrich never went to trial.
Aldrich was arrested in 2021 for making bomb threats leading to about 10 private homes being evacuated. The charges were eventually dropped with no explanation. The judge's decision to release the records comes after news organizations sought the documents through court proceedings.
Fox's Eben Brown. The nightclub shooting killed 5 and injured 17. America's listening to Fox News.
Jason in the house. All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizava. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best. Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Police refused to give up on identifying a little boy murdered in 1957.
The body of a little boy about 4 years old was found in Philadelphia 66 years ago. He was malnourished and had been beaten to death. He was buried, but investigators exhumed him twice. After the second time, his DNA was entered into a database, and that led genealogists to find out the identities of his biological mother and then father, as well as the boy's identity, Joseph Augustus Sorelli. Captain Jason Smith says it will be an uphill battle to find his killer.
Well, at this point in time, a lot of the family members who would have been old enough to have a memory of any incident that might have occurred are, normally long gone.
Investigators say this is the first time they've identified a victim in a cold case using genetic genealogy techniques. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Police say a Georgia man killed his ex-wife's divorce attorney and then set the law office on fire. Lawrenceville firefighters discovered the body of attorney Douglas Lewis in the office. Police quickly arrested 65-year-old Alan Tea, who they say burned himself when he set the fire. The state of California is considering slashing subsidies for rooftop solar power.
The debate is about how much those who don't have solar subsidize those who do. Right now, the state mandates utilities pay homeowners with rooftop solar 30 cents for every kilowatt hour they generate, whether the grid needs it or not. A new proposal cuts that to 5 cents, numbers that make rooftop systems unaffordable, threatening some 70,000 jobs. But supporters say it's also about grid reliability. Because solar is irregular, sometimes there's too much, others too little, risking a blackout.
Fox's William LaJeunesse. And stocks gained ground after 5 straight sessions of losses. The Dow rose 183 points. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 5.99% and up to $50,000. And with the Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas loan, contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier. Member FDIC, Equal Opportunity Lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pika's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
another big halftime show here on The Point, very skillfully conducted by none other than Jose, our producer. And Jose, this would be a good time to remind folks once again about how they could get their face on the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery.
Absolutely, Bob. You can go to www.thepoint.gu, look for the beard and the shirt. Click on that link, and it'll take you to the link that'll take you to where you can purchase your shirt. When it arrives in the mail, take a selfie, and then send that selfie to The Point's WhatsApp at 671-797-8255, and then you will be a part of the Rogues Gallery.
Yeah, man, that really gives you some high-powered bragging rights, Jose, to be part of the Tall Tales Rogues Gallery. Okay, second half. Ordinarily, we do the Lou Leon Guerrero talent show. Are we ready for that today?
Not today.
Yeah, we've got a technical problem. Sorry, we can't play it today, but we will play it next week for sure, right, Jose?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I'm back here again with the sexist group versus women. It's a story from the Post called Heartbeat Act at Bottom of Agenda. Women's Chamber has concerns. And I have been talking about the soft bigotry of low expectations of having a separate chamber of commerce for women. And obviously it's pretty sexist. You guys can have that one, and we got ours. Ray used a term this morning that perhaps all of our listeners don't understand. He used the term plank owner. And this is what a plank owner is. It's a Navy term. When a ship is built in a shipyard, it's put into the water. It slides down what's called the ways into the water. Well, first of all, there will be some dignitary there with a bottle of champagne, and she'll break the bottle of champagne against the side of the ship, the bulkhead of the ship. And then the ship will slide down into the water. That's called commissioning the ship. Now, the members of the crew aboard that ship, when the ship is commissioned, are called plank owners. So if you were aboard the USS Paul Revere, if you were a crew member of the USS Paul Revere, when it slid down the ways and was commissioned, you would be a plank owner of the USS Paul Revere. I know that because once upon a time I had a cigarette lighter that had a picture of the ship, USS Paul Revere, plank owner on it. I suppose there's a little stolen valor here, because when that happens, the ship's store will sell, they used to anyhow, sell cigarette lighters for the crew members to carry around for bragging rights. So that's what a plank owner is. I was not a plank owner there. But Ray used that term this morning because he was talking about the sexist group known as the Women's Chamber, and he told us who one of the plank owners is. Governor Lou Leon Guerrero.
There's no gasp from the crowd.
No. And not only was she a plank owner, I think she may have been the ship builder. She may have been running the shipyard when that ship was built. So she started the Women's Chamber of Commerce. And, of course, we can only speculate for her reasons, but it worked out very well for her, didn't it?
It's kind of a new organization, huh?
Yeah.
Less than 10 years?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Probably about the time the governor figured, I'd like to run for governor someday.
Kind of like an action pack?
Sort of like a group of constituents, who you could kind of count on. So that's the Women's Chamber, but they have concerns. Now, everything that I've seen about the Women's Chamber is they're very pro-abortion. Would that have anything to do with the plank owner I just mentioned? So here's how the story goes. The Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce continues to levy concerns with Bill 291, the Guam Heartbeat Act. The measure is currently before the legislature during the final session of this legislative term. The controversial measure would ban abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected or within 6 weeks sooner than when most women know they are pregnant. The measure makes no exceptions for rape or incest, only for medical emergencies. The bill was authored by local attorney Peter Skro and introduced by Senator Talina Nelson. It is co-sponsored by Senators Tony Atta, Frank Blas Jr., Chris Duenas, and Amanda Shelton. Nelson and Atta won't be returning next term, having lost their bids for other offices. However, Blas, Duenas, and Shelton won re-election. The Guam Heartbeat Act is similar to a Texas law enacted last year with which it shares its name. The Texas law was developed at a time when abortion was constitutionally protected. To dodge judicial review and avoid potentially having the law struck down like other bans, the Texas law authorized private lawsuits to serve as enforcement rather than empowering government officials. This is because federal constitutional challenges to state law normally are brought against officers charged with enforcement. The Guam bill utilizes the same enforcement scheme, allowing people to sue for at least $10,000 anyone who performs or induces an abortion in violation of the measure, or anyone who knowingly engages in conduct that aids or abets the performance or inducement of an abortion, regardless of whether the person knew or should have known that the abortion would be performed or induced in violation of this section. However, women who seek or obtain an abortion are exempt from lawsuits. The Guam Women's Chamber of Commerce cited two main concerns. First, that the businesses are at risk because aiding and abetting is not clearly defined. The Women's Club listed several scenarios that could be considered aiding and abetting under a more broad interpretation. According to the GWCC, these include a financial institution providing a loan where proceeds paid for an abortion, a health insurance company that covered the cost of an abortion challenged under the bill, and a medical provider who refers a woman to an abortion provider outside of Guam. I think they should have added, or the director of a government agency who can't stop talking about abortion, whose initials are Calamity Jane. Here's a quote: GWCC would like to better understand from the bill's sponsors how our local businesses will be protected from frivolous lawsuits initiated under the private rights of action authorized by this law, the organization stated. The bill threatens access to an already fragile health care system, according to the Women's Chamber. Medical providers, particularly those that specialize in women's health, prenatal and birthing services, are placed at risk by this law. GWCC urges the bill's sponsors to solicit feedback from various medical providers in this space to better understand how this bill affects them and how it may impact the critical services they may offer. The organization urged Speaker Therese Tetlahi, chair of the Legislative Committee on Health, to conduct a series of roundtable discussions on the measure. Urged, yeah. But
is that a soft word for intimidated?
Yeah, but none had occurred. Yeah, it's better, instead of having a public hearing, certain set of rules, what you can do, what you can't do, presiding officer, it's better to have one of these free-for-alls called a roundtable discussion.
I remember when they were angry at her and were almost intimidating her staff to do it instead of holding a hearing.
Exactly. And I have a feeling that Speaker Tlahi is pro-abortion, but she's not going to use the government's back scratcher to scratch her own back, which is the standard that we hold all government officials to. The original concerns raised by the Women's Club have not been addressed. It's imperative that we hear from legal, health, and social service experts and social justice warriors, of course.
Was this written before the hearings?
And how this legislation would affect our communities after the hearing. And how this legislation would affect our community before it becomes law, the organization stated. On Wednesday, the Heartbeat Act was set aside to the bottom of the legislative session agenda. But even if it passes the legislature, Governor Lujan Guerrero is expected to veto it. I would expect to see Lujan Guerrero on a folding chair out by the front door of the legislature, with holding up her pen like kind of like she's doing Blue Stars or something like that.
Will Parkinson be holding the umbrella?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who will? Who?
Won't.
Oh, won't Parkinson.
Will, won't, or won't, will.
Yeah. But that isn't to say the law was ultimately considered constitutional. As the High Court stated in its last ruling on the law, the ultimate merits question whether the Texas law is consistent with federal constitution is not before the court. A court just doesn't pick up this court is not like the Superior Court, where Levin thought, I'd like to give the governor some cover, so I'm going to file these papers and call them a declaratory judgment. That's not how the Supreme Court works. A properly justiciable issue has to come to the Supreme Court in the form of a petition for writ of certiorari. Now, I expect, one of the ways that it could get there would be like this. Let's say that a doctor performs an abortion. Somebody sues the doctor. Verdict for the verdict against the doctor. He owes $10,000. He takes that appeal to the Supreme Court of Texas. Texas sustains the trial court. He then petitions the U.S. Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari. But even then, I don't know how he would frame the issue. Not easy to see. The guy that came up with this is kind of a legal genius to figure all this stuff out. The threat of civil suit with potential payout of thousands of dollars for the complainant serves as a strong deterrent, and that's the object. It was the best we could do before the Dobbs decision. Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor, in a dissent in one of the Supreme Court rulings, said the Texas legislature had deputized its citizens as bounty hunters, offering them cash prizes for civilly prosecuting their neighbors' medical procedures. But it's unclear how many suits have actually been filed under the Texas law. One well-publicized lawsuit was filed against a doctor, but that was ultimately used to test the law in court. Moreover, since the Texas law was enacted, the Supreme Court reversed decades-old case law that considered abortion a constitutional right. That was reversed. States are now able to levy abortion regulations without the prior constitutional restrictions. According to the American Civil Liberties Union of Texas, the Texas heartbeat law is currently in effect, but so is a trigger ban that followed the Supreme Court's reversal, which imposes criminal penalties for providers and doctors performing or aiding abortion at all stages of pregnancy. Legal challenges continue for the Texas heartbeat law, with a former state senator filing suit in the Western District of Texas. The suit was brought against 3 Texas residents who intend to sue abortion funds or commence legal proceedings against at least one abortion fund, and publicly threatened Texas abortion funds with lawsuits. What's an abortion fund? I don't know. It's not a very well-written article. Meanwhile, abortion remains legal on Guam for now. Outside the Heartbeat Act, there's an old local abortion ban that was never repealed. An injunction was placed on the law, but Attorney General-elect Doug Moylan, let's have a round of applause for Doug Moylan, said he plans to move to dissolve the injunction. That isn't expected to come without legal challenges. Anita Areola of the Guam People for Choice Coalition has said Moylan can expect a fight on his hands if he does try to dissolve the injunction. Unlike the Heartbeat Act, the old ban utilizes traditional enforcement and imposes criminal penalties even on women who obtain abortions. The old ban also contains a provision akin to the aiding and abetting portion of the Heartbeat Act.
I have a question, Bob.
Sir.
Why do they refer to it as an old ban? Are all laws in the books that are more than a certain age tagged as old, like any of our murder laws, our robbery, our criminal laws?
Not usually.
But this one, it's old.
A law is a law.
Yeah.
The fact that it's unlike people, the fact that it's old doesn't mean that it's feeble and lost its power.
Could it be they're trying to characterize it as feeble?
Could be. Any person who solicits a woman to submit to an abortion or through use of any means to cause an abortion is guilty of a misdemeanor, the old ban states. This was put into effect when the late attorney Janet Benshoof was arrested after delivering a speech in which she said Guam women could obtain abortions in Hawaii, providing the phone number of a Planned Parenthood clinic in the state, according to the WAPO. The old ban also contains a referendum provision on whether it should be repealed, but how that works is unclear, as the law references an election that took place decades ago. Well, extensive coverage here.
It was actually pretty good as far as the balance goes, in a sense.
Yeah, they didn't need to use the word. Maybe they figured, they're going to read it on Tall Tales. So right. I want the host to know we're looking out for what's old.
Now, if they were consistent and use the Heartbeat, or call the Heartbeat Act the new ban, then that would have made sense.
Yeah.
The old ban.
Okay. A little early for the seventh inning stretch, and I got somebody in the green room. None other than another Joe, who wants to give us an update on the heartbeat bill. Tell us more, another Joe.
Hey, Bob. So the update is they're recessed until Monday at 9 a.m. Senators at the 36th Guam Legislature.
They just can't wait to get their teeth into this one, right?
They sure are hiding it. I think that very well. But yeah, so Monday, 9 a.m. So we'll be watching, hopefully.
Well, thanks a lot for keeping track of this for us, another Joe. We're going to make you and you've been sworn in, so you can be an unofficial reporter for Tall Tales.
Okay, well, thanks, and I'll miss you guys for 2 days until Monday.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but somehow we'll make it again, another Joe.
All right, take care, Case.
Hold on.
This is what happened. Senator raised a move to adjourn because Tall Tales is starting at 4 o'clock.
Aye.
And the speaker said, or I don't know who it was up there, said, any objections? There were no objections, and they adjourned till Monday. That's what I heard.
Yeah, good call. Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. Okay, next we've got Brandon versus the United States Marine Corps. And I've got an article here called Whitlock. Russia uses Brittany Griner to fleece President Biden in the Bay of Big. Now, you know a little bit about Whitlock, right? Jason Whitlock, Jose?
I know he's a sportscaster, and he's the least that I've known of him, and he's on superficial terms, what I told you, he's also African American,
Yeah.
which makes this article maybe kind of interesting to see who goes against it.
Well, it gives him a license to say things that other people can't say without being
according
canceled.
to Red Rice.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, the Bay of Big, that's B-I-G, proves that critical race theory and diversity, inclusion, and equity harm America and its citizens. The Bay of Big is my nickname for the lopsided trade the Biden administration executed for the release of WNBA player Brittany incarcerated Griner. He uses the word incarcerated as her middle name. Griner was held for 9 months in Russia and sentenced to 9 years in a Russian prison for smuggling a small amount of hashish oil. President Biden surrendered notorious Russian arms dealer Victor Bout for Griner's freedom. An American jury convicted Bout, called the Merchant of Death, of conspiring to kill American citizens and providing aid to terrorist organizations. He spent a decade locked inside a U.S. penitentiary before being sprung on Thursday in exchange for Griner. It's a hardcore guy. I don't know if he's a good rebounder, if he scores a lot of three-pointers.
I hear he wears braids, though.
Yeah. The Merchant of Death for an WNBA player might be the worst trade in the history of American sports. It certainly rivals the incredible bounty of draft picks the Vikings gave the Cowboys for Herschel Walker and the $125,000 the Yankees gave the Red Sox for Babe Ruth. All right, let's head for good time to go to Wrigley Field. Babe Ruth, right?
Christmas is a very special time, but it can also be a very hard time. For the foster children Harvest House serves, it can be difficult and painful being away from their families and siblings. During Harvest House's Christmas celebration event, we hope that siblings living in different foster homes can join together to share in Christmas joy. We need your help to provide all 600 plus foster children with Christmas gifts. Help us make this a memorable Christmas for each of them. Harvest House will be accepting gifts until December 14th. Contact us at 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net if you have questions or want a suggested gift list. That's 300-5433 or email harvest.house@hbcguam.net.
All 3 stations, all 3 morning shows. Thanks to all the listeners for Pika's Best, Choice Broadcasting has swept the top 3 best radio stations. The Point, Boss 104, and Star 101. Top 3 radio personalities, Kyle Mandapat, Ray Gibson, and Daryl Lizava. Put the power of Pika's Best to work for you. If you're an advertiser, call 671-888-7346 for information, rates, and packages. And let us get your message out to Pika's Best listeners with Pika's Best Broadcasters. And thanks for listening to Pika's Best.
So here we are, Wrigley Field. Pretty appropriate since we were just talking about the Red Sox and Babe Ruth. I don't think the Babe ever got a chance to play in Wrigley Field because Babe played for the Red Sox and then they sold him to the Yankees, giving rise to something known as the curse of the Bambino. The Red Sox could never beat the Yankees. They had a really hard time. And this was the curse of the Bambino, which was finally broken about 10 years ago, I think. But Babe played for the Red Sox and the Yankees, both American League teams. The Cubs, of course, are in the National. So the only way that the Babe would have played in Wrigley Field would have been if one of the Yankees played the Cubs in the World Series. Given the Cubs' World Series record, that was highly unlikely, unless there was an all-star game played at Wrigley. And I ran across a story today that the Cubs think it's their turn to do the all-star game, and they're lobbying heavy to get it. I sure hope they get it. Okay, so really bad trade here when the Vikings gave a lot of draft picks to the Cowboys for Herschel Walker. They should have picked Warnock instead.
A little sports political humor.
Yeah. Okay, so the story says, let's dig a little deeper and turn a bit more serious. In 2015, Griner pleaded guilty to domestic violence against her partner, WNBA peer Glory Johnson. Both Glory and Brittany are females. In 2020, in reaction to the death of St. George Floyd, Griner pledged never again to stand for the national anthem and said the song had no place in American sports. Griner is not an American patriot. She's an entitled, spoiled athlete who is comfortable flouting the law. So why did her release from a Russian prison take precedence over the release of former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan? Now, I got to correct him here. There's no such thing as a former Marine. Unless maybe you get discharged from the Marine Corps. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So instead of saying former Marine, you could say Marine veteran. That would be the way to say it. So why did Griner's release from a Russian president take precedence over the release of Marine veteran Paul Whelan or teacher Mark Fogel? Russia accuses Whelan of being a spy. Fogel received a 14-year sentence in Russia for bringing a half ounce of medical marijuana into the country. Fogel, who is 60 years old, was arrested in 2021. Man, 13 more years to go. Griner jumped to the head of the line because the Biden administration and corporate media are driven by critical race theory, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Well, put yourself in Joe Biden's place, okay?
There's some big depends. Oh, I mean shoes.
I need the long size Depends to put my. Yeah, good call, Jose. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but you got it right. So on the one hand, you've got this guy named Paul Whelan, his picture floats around the nets quite a bit. A Marine, and if anybody is probably guilty of toxic masculinity, it's him. If you look at his picture, he's got a mustache. That tells you everything you need to know about toxic masculinity, right? If a man didn't want to be a toxic masculine, he would shave his mustache off. So you got toxic masculinity Marine on the one hand, and then you've got an African American, a woman of color, who's covered with tattoos, who's taller than I am,
Say it isn't so.
who's queer, and smokes marijuana. Where's the choice here? I mean,
couldn't have created a better identity.
Really? I mean, and you would pick Paul Whelan if you're Joe Biden? Man, you wouldn't ever want to walk out of the White House. Well, I think he ever wants to walk out of the White House anyhow. You'd never want to be wheeled out of the White House. So once again, Griner jumped to the head of the line because the Biden administration and corporate media are driven by critical race theory, diversity, inclusion, and equity. CRT and DIE dictated that Biden go unreasonable and dangerous lengths to win the release of Griner. She's black and gay. She's no more valuable to American freedom and safety than Whalen or Fogel, who are, ready for this, white men. Yeah. Whalen and Fogel, a Marine and a teacher, actually contribute more to American society than a weed-smoking basketball player who promotes anti-American sentiment. Now, I got to stop here and insert the way I think citizenship should operate, and that is we don't have degrees of worthiness for American citizenship. You could be that guy that used to hang around out in front here, or you could be a banker or a lawyer or whatever, and the American citizenship rights and privileges should be the same for you as they are for everybody else. We shouldn't determine that one citizen is more worthy than another. Now, unknown to most folks who haven't spent much time with this book, the Constitution, most of your constitutional rights, most of the Constitution doesn't speak to citizens, it speaks to persons. So the one right that you have as a citizen that does not extend to persons is this: if you ever leave the country, they have to let you back in, no matter what kind of a horrible, you could be a dirty skunk and an honorary pig stealer, and they got to let you back in. Now, something that goes along with citizenship and that is that when you are overseas and when you're in a foreign country, you are entitled to the diplomatic services of the consulate in that country. So if you wind up in the pokey, they will, if they can, come and visit you in the pokey, and they will do the best they can to help you in that situation, which they should do for all three of these guys, and and not weigh which one of them is more beneficial to the United States. But if they did, it wouldn't be much of a contest, would it, Jose? Okay, now Jason Whitlock says Whalen and Fogel should be the priority, but absolutely no one cares about Fogel. He can rot in a Russian prison for the next 13 years, and it will draw little attention or sympathy. The Griner trade will force the Biden administration to cut an even worse trade for Whalen. The wheels are in motion for what that, as you read this. Brittany Griner's, quote, wife talked about supporting Whalen. Leftists are publicly feigning support for Whalen now that Griner is released. Dallas Cowboys linebacker Micah Parsons, arguably the best player in football, tweeted sincere outrage over Whalen not being part of the Griner deal. His handlers quickly made him backtrack and apologize.
That's awful.
It is. It is. Just spoke to some people that I respect and trust, Parsons tweeted. I should have been more educated on the topic and not tweeted out of emotion for my family and others who have served. For that, I apologize. Also, if what I'm told about the attempts to bring retired Marine Paul Whalen home are true, then the best outcome was accomplished. I pray Mr. Whalen comes home, but I'm extremely happy for Brittany and her family. I am not too prideful to admit when I have been made a mistake or when I've been coerced into changing my public stance. This LGBTQ BLM alphabet mafia flexing, this is the LGBTQ BLM alphabet mafia flexing its political might. Are Americans stronger and safer when our leaders make decisions based on sexuality and skin color? No, we're weaker. Russian leader Vladimir Putin used our commitment to racial and sexual idolatry to fleece us in this race. You can bet that's true.
Idolatry, indeed.
Yeah. And you can bet that the Russians on the ground over here in the consular service said, hey, you can drive a really hard bargain for Greer. Because, you know, the usual suspects will make such a fuss and they'll make Biden's life so miserable that he'll give in. And then you'll still have Whalen for your next trick. So don't even think about giving him Whalen. That's what they must be thinking. There are rumors that Putin targeted Griner for arrest because he recognized the Biden administration would be forced to bow to pressure from the alphabet mafia. On Thursday, Biden warned American citizens traveling abroad to take extra precaution to follow all laws of foreign countries if you're not black and queer. Oh, no, that's not what the story says. I just threw that in there. He knows the Bay of Big has made all Americans more vulnerable. Simple-minded race idolaters will not recognize the damage done by the Bay of Big. The damage doesn't matter to them. They only care about racial retribution. Whalen and Fogel are so-called privileged white men. They now enjoy the privilege of staying in the Russian prisons for longer. Brittany Greer is allegedly owed this privilege. They actually owe it to her. It's payback for George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, or some other dead black person the alphabet mafia has adopted for political power. CRT and DIA have weakened our educational system, our work environments, movie and television. We should not be surprised that foreign policy is next on the hit list. That's exactly where we are.
He hit it spot on.
I've got a little more coverage on this. This is so important that I want to do a really thorough job on it. So, Johnny, I'll make sure to get you in before the end of the show. We got to go to Churchill Downs right now, and I'm going to come back to Brittany Griner.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 5.99% and up to $50,000. And with the Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas loan, contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier. Member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. We're going to go from here. We're going to take a direct flight to Salt Lake City before the end of the show. But I'm still working on the whole, still complimenting our president on his negotiating skills. So this is an article that I picked up from, let's see here. It's written by Spencer Brown. And it points out that Bout was serving a 25-year prison term sentence for conspiring to kill Americans, trafficking anti-aircraft missiles, and providing material support to terrorists. They don't talk about his jump shot, his ability to drive the baseline, how tough he is under the boards. They don't give us any of the really important information here. In August of this year, the man who oversaw the effort to capture Bout wrote in Foreign Policy, that's a magazine, that if Biden traded the merchant of death, such a decision, quote, wouldn't just be a slap in the face of law enforcement officers and operatives who labored to bring Bout down, many of them risking their lives in the process, but would also pose a grave threat to the national security of the United States and its allies. To wit, a senior Defense Department official quoted by Politico said there is a concern that Bout would return to doing the same kind of work that he's done in the past. Despite staying anonymous, the concerns apparently spreading at the Pentagon are also shared by named Democrats as well. You know, it's pretty bad when the Democrats don't like it. Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat from New Jersey, the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, did not hold back his evaluation of Biden's decision to free the merchant of death, calling the prisoner swap that freed Bout a deeply disturbing decision. This should be a moment of deep reflection for the United States government to recognize we have a serious problem with hostage-taking of Americans. Russians and other regimes that take American citizens hostage cannot pretend that there is an equivalent between Brittany Griners of the world and people like Victor Bout, the so-called merchant of death. Nothing could be farther from the truth, and we cannot ignore that releasing Bout back into the world is a deeply disturbing decision. We must stop inviting dictatorial and rogue regimes to use Americans overseas as bargaining chips, and we must try to do better at encouraging American citizens against traveling to places like Russia, where they are primary targets for this type of unlawful detention. That's from a Democrat. In Thursday's White House briefing, Karine Jean-Pierre struggled to assuage any concerns from Menendez or the Pentagon about the merchant of death, or that his freedom granted by President Biden wouldn't result in him quickly becoming a threat to U.S. security. In one exchange with Real Clear Politics' Phil Wegman, Jean-Pierre refused to say the dangerous terrorist-supporting arms dealer presented a security concern to the White House. Apparently, speaking for the President of the United States does not qualify her to answer. She's not the Intelligence Committee. How convenient.
Or intelligence.
Yeah. You know, if a reporter asked her what time it was, she wouldn't answer. In another back and forth with Peter Doocy, Jean-Pierre struggled further to explain why the swap was so lopsided and resulting in the freeing of a dangerous international terrorist-supporting arms dealer. If the Biden administration expected to take a victory lap on the prisoner swap this week, they clearly thought wrong, as demonstrated by the way Jean-Pierre ended Thursday's briefing. Okay, I have another story here. This ran in Blaze, and it's very short, Johnny Utah. NBC tried covertly revising the article that originally contradicted White House claim that the Biden administration wasn't given a choice between Griner and Marine Paul Whelan. Remember, they said our choice was we either take Griner or nobody. That's the party line. NBC issued a report contradicting the Biden administration's official narrative, concerning the government's prisoner swap with Russia. Apparently hoping no one would take notice, the news organization quickly changed its original report without signaling it had done so. Well, ostensibly intended to buttress the administration's claim about its inability to bring home Marine veteran Paul Whelan, NBC's news stealth edit has prompted some to wonder what actually went on behind the scenes. In my thought process, I don't believe it. Only after being met with criticism online and a request for comment from the Blaze did the news organization offer a retroactive correction hours later. Now, here are the details. In its December 8 prisoner swap with Russia, the Biden administration ultimately explained Victor Bout, who conspired to kill, etc., so on. NBC's, citing a senior U.S. official, first reported the Kremlin gave the White House a choice of either Greiner or Whelan or none. That's what they ran. Ricky Ratliff-Feldman, director of programming at Blaze Media, noted a significant discrepancy between NBC's new original report and the article as it now exists online. Without issuing an editorial note, NBC News made a stealthy change to the article such that it now reads, the Kremlin ultimately gave the White House a choice of either Greiner or no one after different options were proposed.
That means the same thing.
Yeah.
Greiner or no one.
Yeah. So there you go. Classic. I should have used this in systemic racism. The narrative is that we wouldn't do anything like that. We wouldn't do that. It was not our fault. We had cover here. Either we take Greiner or it's nobody at all. So had we had a choice, we might have taken Whelan, but we didn't have a choice. It's just so corrupt. Okay, I've got Johnny Utah calling us from Salt Lake City, right, Johnny?
Yes, sir. Hey, Judge Bob. Well, two things that I want to talk about is that it's coming out is Paul Whelan, is that how you say his name?
Whelan.
What is your understanding of his background?
He's been in a Russian prison for 10 years. The Russians accused him of spying. He never pleaded guilty to spying, unlike Brittany, who did plead guilty to the drug charge. That's about as much as I know about him. He's a Marine, got a mustache. What more do you need to know?
Okay, so true. He's denying the espionage charges, and she obviously committed a crime by taking, I guess, hash or marijuana into the things. There's two things I want to point out. One, well, actually, there's more than two, but one big one is that if it wasn't for the Brittany being getting in trouble and getting locked up in Russia, we wouldn't even be having this discussion, because they have no interest in getting Paul Weiner out of jail at all.
They'd wait until we had 3 or 4 Bouts locked up in our prisons, and then maybe they'd start talking trade, because they don't care about their people in our jails. And of course, what they're doing is they're negotiating.
Well, yeah. Well, the only thing that's happened right now is that they're getting Brittany out of jail. One of the things that is starting to leak out of Russia is that Brittany might not be a Brittany. That Brittany might actually be a castrated male. That's one of the news breakers that's out there. And I don't know.
Johnny,
yes, sir.
Pardon the expression, but you're nuts.
I'm just saying what I'm reading. The other thing too is
hold on. Jose's got a sound effect here. Go ahead, Jose. And then the snare drum. Yeah.
I'm just telling you what I'm reading.
Johnny, go back and Johnny, go back and examine that dialogue again. What did they do what happened to Griner?
According to what's kind of starting to leak out of Russia is that she's a he.
Because
of sex change.
Okay, how did the sex change happen, Johnny?
Well, I'm not going to give it. That's obvious. I mean, all
right, go ahead. Go on.
So let's
I
move
won't
on
interrupt.
from that. Okay, Dad, let's move on from that. Paul Weiler. Let's talk about him for a minute.
Yeah.
There's some major issues with him. Number one, he was convicted in a special court martial in 2008 and received a bad conduct discharge for larceny. He did an undisclosed amount of time in the brig in Miramar and was released, I believe, in 2009. He's been a security consultant and a sheriff as a civilian. He was a reservist, okay, and went to Iraq twice as a reservist. He's throughout his career, he's been in the private security consulting firm area, but for whatever reason, I don't know what happened, what sent him down the wrong path with the Marine Corps and how he ended up getting a bad conduct discharge. But he did go to a special court martial, and he was a staff sergeant. And of course, when he got separated from the military, he was, I believe, a private, whatever it is.
Hey, Johnny, I'm sorry, but Mr. Ravel is calling us. It's a good call, good information. I wish we had more time. Thanks for calling in, okay?
Yes, sir. Okay.
See you Monday. Let's go, Brandon.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
They could have done more. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. That's what some Republican lawmakers are saying after the Biden administration negotiated the release of American basketball star Brittany Griner, but was not able to get retired Marine Paul Whelan or history teacher Mark Fogel out. Republican Congressman Chris Walz of Florida tells Fox News.
My heart breaks for the Whelan family. My heart breaks for the Americans being held around the world, and my heart breaks for future Americans that are going to get snatched off the street the next time a dictatorship wants something.
The White House says, however, the one-for-one prisoner swap was the only deal the U.S. could get.
The Russians just treat Mr. Whelan differently. They put him in a special category, and that makes negotiating over his release through a swap of some kind much more difficult than it was in the case of Brittany Griner.
White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby on Fox News. President Biden vowing to keep working to get the other Americans released. Same-sex and interracial couples won't have to worry about the Supreme Court stripping away their marriage rights now that Congress has passed a landmark bill.
The House gave final approval to the Respect for Marriage Act, legislation codifying federal protections for same-sex and interracial marriage.
This chamber proudly stands with forces of freedom, not going back, and justice.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi presided over the vote. Every Democrat voted yes, along with 39 Republicans. A bipartisan Senate vote advanced the bill last week. It now heads to the president's desk to be signed into law. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
And a roadblock to Microsoft's plans to buy Activision Blizzard. The Federal Trade Commission is suing to block the $75 billion deal over antitrust concerns. America's listening to Fox News.
Stay on
on top of the latest forecast with America's Weather Team in the palm of your hands.
Here's the latest from America's Weather Center.
It's Fox weather updates throughout your busy day, every day.
5 inches of rain by tomorrow.
Temperatures being 30 degrees above average.
Put the power of over 100 meteorologists and the worldwide resources of Fox in your hands with the Fox Weather Podcast. Precise, personal, powerful. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com. Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now.
A federal appeals court allows New York to keep enforcing a state law that